He saw her fingers dance across the screen, her laugh a melody he barely recognized. A single name on the screen burned into his mind. E. That night, as she slept, he broke a vow he had always upheld. He unlocked her phone. Ryan found the note on his car windshield, the paper trembling slightly in his hands. You're not the only one being betrayed. Meet me at Riverview Cafe tomorrow at 3 p.m. alone. You've been signing off on fraud, Emily. Ryan's voice cut through the silence like a knife. Emily froze, her fingers curling around the edge of the table. I trusted him. Ethan leaned closer to Emily, his voice a low, dangerous whisper. If you've crossed me, you'll regret it. Isabella stared at her screen, the message blinking ominously. You think it's over? It's just beginning. Her fingers hovered. Over the keyboard, a chill running down her spine. Welcome to the Alibis Exposed, where trust meets betrayal in the dark. The suburbs of Seattle were a haven for families like the Caldwells. Ryan and Emily Caldwell seemed to embody the American dream, their lives perfectly captured in snapshots displayed in their spacious, sunlit home. From romantic trips to Paris to neighborhood barbecues, their journey appeared idyllic, a testament to 10 years of love and partnership. Ryan, a financial analyst with a reputation for precision, often immersed himself in work. His meticulousness wasn't just limited to his profession, it extended to his relationships and personal life. Emily, on the other hand, brought color to their existence with her thriving interior design business. She had a knack for transforming mundane spaces into masterpieces, a skill that seemed to mirror her ability to add vibrancy to their marriage. Yet cracks had begun to form in their foundation. Ryan had noticed subtle changes in Emily's behavior over the past few months. Her laughter, once a melody that filled their home, now felt forced. Her smile, though as radiant as ever, seemed to falter when she thought no one was looking. Late night. Projects had become her routine, but the tangible results of her work were conspicuously absent. One crisp autumn evening, Ryan arrived home earlier than expected. The driveway held Emily's car, but the house was eerily quiet. Passing through the living room, he spotted her through the kitchen window. Emily was in the backyard, seated on the patio swing, her face illuminated by the glow of her phone. She was laughing, a sound he hadn't heard in weeks, her fingers dancing across the screen. His curiosity sharpened as he noticed the contact name. E, for a man like Ryan, whose life revolved around understanding details. The ambiguity of E was unsettling. Emily had always been protective of her phone, a trait he'd brushed off as a modern quirk. When asked, she'd dismiss his inquiries with playful remarks about girl talk with her best friend, Claire. But this time, his instincts told him otherwise. That night, while Emily slept, Ryan found himself staring at her phone on the nightstand. The screen dimmed and then glowed faintly as notifications appeared. Succumbing to the gnawing suspicion, he reached for it. A combination of their anniversary date and her favorite number unlocked the device. His heart pounded as he scrolled through her messages. What he uncovered shattered his reality. The texts weren't from Claire, they were from Ethan Parker, a man whose flirtatious tone and intimate photos painted a vivid picture of betrayal. Ethan wasn't just any man. He was married to Isabella, a woman known in underground circles as a brilliant hacker who had emigrated from Amsterdam to the United States in the early 1990s. Though Isabella had left her shadowy past behind to focus on family life and support, Ethan's entrepreneurial endeavors, her presence in his life, lent a layer of intrigue to this sordid affair. Ryan felt a mix of devastation and anger. How could Emily risk everything they had built? The betrayal was unbearable, but instead of reacting impulsively, Ryan's analytical mind took over. He needed to understand the full scope of her deception before confronting her. The next morning, Ryan's interactions with Emily were deliberately normal. He watched her closely as she sipped her coffee, scrolling through her phone, her expression unreadable. It was impossible to reconcile the woman before him with the one who had exchanged such intimate messages with another man. Determined to uncover the truth, Ryan sought out Claire, hoping she might inadvertently shed light on Emily's behavior. They met at a quiet cafe downtown, the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingling with the tension in the air. "Ryan, what's this about?" Claire asked, her tone wary. She had always been a fiercely loyal friend to Emily, and Ryan knew broaching the topic required delicacy. "I need your help," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Have you noticed anything different about Emily lately? Anything I should know?" Claire hesitated, her eyes searching his face. "Ryan, Emily's been restless," she admitted finally, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "She loves you, but I think she's been struggling with something. I don't know what, but maybe you both need to have an honest conversation." Her response, while measured, only deepened Ryan's resolve. Conversations wouldn't suffice. He needed facts. Hiring a private investigator was his next step. If Emily had strayed, he would have irrefutable proof. Over the next 2 weeks, Ryan received daily updates from the investigator. Each report chipped away at the remnants of his denial. Emily and Ethan's clandestine meetings were documented in painful detail. Intimate dinners, long walks in secluded parks, and afternoons spent in upscale hotels. The evidence was damning, but it was the accompanying photographs that hit hardest. The woman he had loved and trusted was a stranger in those images. Unbeknownst to Ryan, another storm was brewing. Isabella, Ethan's wife, had noticed changes in her husband. Late nights at the office, unexplained absences, and guarded behavior around his phone had raised red flags. A woman with her skills didn't need long to uncover the truth. Using techniques she hadn't employed in years, Isabella delved into Ethan's digital life. What she found wasn't just betrayal, it was a betrayal that intersected with her own life in a way she hadn't expected. Isabella's search led her to Emily, and by extension, Ryan. Recognizing a kindred spirit in pain, she decided to reach out. She left an anonymous note on Ryan's car windshield. "You're not the only one being betrayed. Meet me at Riverview Cafe tomorrow at 3 p.m. Alone." Ryan's initial reaction was skepticism, but the cryptic message intrigued him. At worst, it could be a prank. At best, it might offer answers. The Riverview Cafe was bustling when Ryan arrived the next afternoon. Isabella spotted him immediately, her sharp features framed by dark hair tied into a sleek ponytail. She radiated confidence, but there was a hint of vulnerability in her eyes as she extended a hand. "You must be Ryan," she said, her tone measured. "I'm Isabella Parker, Ethan's wife." The name struck him like a thunderclap. He hadn't expected this meeting to be with someone so directly connected to his turmoil. "I know about Ethan and Emily," she continued, her voice tinged with both anger and resolve. "And I'm guessing you know too, but there's more to this than just an affair." Isabella didn't mince words. Over the next hour, she shared the results of her investigation. Ethan wasn't just unfaithful, he was using Emily as an unwitting accomplice to embezzle funds from his company. Emily's love for Ethan had blinded her to the larger scheme she was entangled in. Ryan's initial shock gave way to disbelief. "Are you saying Emily has no idea what he's doing?" Isabella nodded. "From what I've seen, she thinks this is just about them. She doesn't know she's part of something much bigger and much worse." The revelation left Ryan reeling. Emily's betrayal was devastating enough, but the possibility that she was being manipulated added a layer of complexity he hadn't anticipated. "We can't let them get away with this," Isabella said, her eyes locking onto his. "But we have to be smart. No rash decisions. We hit them where it hurts." And so, an unlikely alliance was formed. Ryan and Isabella, bound by shared pain and a thirst for justice, began planning their next move. Isabella's expertise in technology and Ryan's analytical skills proved to be a formidable combination. Together, they set out to dismantle the web of lies that had entangled their lives. What began as a quest for truth was quickly evolving into something far more dangerous. But for Ryan and Isabella, there was no turning back. The picture-perfect illusion was shattered, and all that remained were the shadows of deception. Ryan sat in his car outside the Riverview Cafe, his hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. The meeting with Isabella had shaken him to his core. Her revelations painted a picture of betrayal that went beyond mere infidelity. It was a labyrinth of deceit, manipulation, and crime. His wife, Emily, was no longer just an unfaithful partner. She was a pawn in a dangerous game orchestrated by Ethan. As he drove home, Ryan's mind raced. His life, meticulously planned and executed like one of his financial strategies, had unraveled in mere days. The betrayal felt personal, but it was the danger Emily now faced that truly terrified him. He wasn't sure if she would listen, but he knew he had to confront her, for her sake and his own. The Caldwell house was eerily quiet when Ryan entered. Emily's car was in the driveway, but the absence of her usual cheerful humming struck him as ominous. He found her in the living room, engrossed in her laptop, the glow of the screen illuminating her face. "Emily," he said, his voice steady, but firm. She looked up, startled. "Ryan, you're home early." Her tone was casual, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. He sat across from her, the weight of the past weeks pressing heavily on his chest. "We need to talk." Emily's smile faltered. "About what?" Ryan leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "About you, about Ethan, about what's really going on." The color drained from Emily's face. "Ryan, I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't," he interrupted, his voice cold. "Don't lie to me anymore. I know about the affair. I know about the hotels, the dinners, the messages. I know everything." Emily's hands trembled as she closed the laptop. "Ryan, He held up a hand. "I'm not done. This isn't just about you and Ethan sneaking around behind my back. He's using you, Emily. Did you know that? He's embezzling money from his company and you're helping him." Her eyes widened in shock. "What? No, that's not true. Ethan wouldn't." "Wouldn't he?" Ryan's voice rose. "Wake up, Emily. You think he loves you? You think he's risking everything just to be with you? He's a criminal, and he's dragging you down with him." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she buried her head in her hands. "I didn't know," she whispered. "I swear I didn't know." Ryan's anger softened, replaced by a mix of pity and frustration. "Emily, you need to tell me everything. How did this start? What has he asked you to do?" Through her sobs, Emily recounted the story. It had begun innocently enough. Ethan was a client who had hired her to design his new office. Their shared lunches turned into long conversations, which turned into something far more intimate. He had never mentioned embezzlement, but he often asked her to sign documents saying they were related to office renovations or budgeting. She hadn't thought twice about it. "I was stupid," Emily admitted. "I let myself believe he cared about me. I never questioned him. I didn't see what he was really doing." Ryan sighed. "You've been naive, but you're not stupid. The question is, what do we do now?" Emily's eyes searched his face. "Ryan, I'm so sorry. Can you forgive me?" He hesitated. The pain of her betrayal was still raw, but the love he had once felt for her hadn't completely faded. That's something we'll have to figure out later. Right now, we need to protect you, and to do that, we need help. The next morning, Ryan contacted Isabella. She was waiting for his call, her voice calm but resolute as she outlined her plan. Isabella's skills as a hacker gave them an edge. She would gather evidence against Ethan, proving not only his infidelity, but also his financial crimes. Together, they could expose him without implicating Emily. Emily was reluctant at first. The idea of working with Isabella, the wife of the man she'd betrayed Ryan with, felt surreal, but the stakes were too high to let pride interfere. With Isabella's guidance, Emily began retracing her steps, identifying the documents Ethan had asked her to sign and the accounts he had used for his schemes. Isabella, meanwhile, worked tirelessly from her home office. Her dual monitors glowed with lines of code and financial spreadsheets as she delved into Ethan's digital trail. She uncovered offshore accounts, falsified records, and encrypted emails that hinted at a larger network of collaborators. It was more than she'd anticipated, but she wasn't deterred. As the days passed, an unexpected camaraderie formed between the three of them. Ryan and Isabella's shared goal created a bond of mutual respect, while Emily's genuine remorse earned her a measure of sympathy. They were an unlikely team, united by pain and a desire for justice. One evening, as they pored over the evidence, Isabella paused, her brow furrowing. "There's something else here," she said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "Ethan's not just embezzling, he's laundering money for someone else," Wunt leaned over her shoulder. "What do you mean?" She pointed to a series of transactions. "These accounts he's moving money into? They belong to a shell corporation tied to a criminal syndicate. This isn't just corporate fraud, it's organized crime." Emily's face paled. "Oh my God, what have I gotten myself into?" Ryan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "We'll figure this out. We just need more evidence." But Isabella's discovery changed the game. Exposing Ethan now carried significant risks. If the syndicate realized they were onto them, it could put all of their lives in danger. "We need to be careful," Isabella warned. "This isn't just about taking Ethan down. We're dealing with people who won't hesitate to silence us if they feel threatened." The room fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Ryan looked at Emily, his expression grim but determined. "We'll be careful, but we can't let them get away with this." As the weeks went on, their plan took shape. Isabella created a detailed dossier of evidence, compiling screenshots, documents, and financial records. Ryan coordinated with a trusted contact at the FBI, someone he had met through his work in finance. They agreed to meet in secret, away from prying eyes. Emily, for her part, began distancing herself from Ethan. She stopped answering his calls and avoided their usual meeting places. Ethan noticed, growing increasingly suspicious and paranoid. One evening, he showed up at the Caldwell house unannounced, demanding to see her. Ryan opened the door, his face a mask of calm despite the storm raging inside him. "Ethan," he said coolly. "What are you doing here?" Ethan's eyes darted nervously. "I need to talk to Emily." "She's not available," Ryan replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And frankly, you've done enough damage. Leave." Ethan hesitated, his jaw tightening. But something in Ryan's gaze made him step back. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Ryan watched him go, his fists clenched at his sides. He knew this was far from over. Ethan wouldn't give up easily, and the shadow of the syndicate loomed larger than ever. But for the first time in weeks, he felt a glimmer of hope. They had a plan, a team, and the truth on their side. The tangled web Ethan had spun was beginning to unravel, and Ryan was determined to see it destroyed no matter the cost. Ryan and Isabella's alliance had breathed new life into their despair. As weeks passed, their calculated investigation deepened. Every clandestine meeting with Isabella brought Ryan closer to understanding the magnitude of Ethan and Emily's betrayal, and just how deeply intertwined the deceit ran. Isabella's skills proved invaluable. Her hacker expertise, a remnant of her dark past, allowed her to access digital trails Ethan thought he had concealed. She unearthed financial discrepancies, cryptic emails and private messages that painted a damning picture of his double life. Together, they began piecing together a narrative that not only exposed Ethan's manipulative schemes but also highlighted how Emily, albeit unknowingly, was complicit in his crimes. The turning point came one evening when Isabella invited Ryan to her secluded townhouse. Her living room, bathed in warm golden light, was transformed into a war room. Monitors displayed spreadsheets, chat logs, and surveillance footage, each screen offering another piece of the puzzle. "I've been digging deeper," Isabella began, gesturing to a large screen showing a series of transactions. "These payments Ethan orchestrated. He's been funneling company funds into offshore accounts, and Emily, she's been unwittingly signing off on the deals." Ryan's heart sank. "She's signing off?" "Yes," Isabella confirmed, her voice tinged with both anger and pity. "He's using her trust and her credentials. To her, it probably looks like he's managing her finances. But he's laundering money through her accounts." Ryan leaned forward, scanning the transactions. "She'd never do this intentionally, but Ethan's manipulation makes her an accessory, doesn't it?" Isabella nodded gravely. "Yes, it does. If this comes to light, Emily'll be dragged down with him, and he won't hesitate to let her take the fall to save himself." The weight of the revelation settled heavily between them. Ryan's anger surged, but his lingering love for Emily tempered his fury. He couldn't bear the thought of her being destroyed, even if her actions had torn his world apart. As they delved deeper, Isabella uncovered another unexpected thread. Ethan wasn't merely laundering money, he was siphoning funds to invest in a dubious tech startup run by his college friend. The startup, already under federal scrutiny for fraudulent practices, was teetering on the edge of collapse. If Ethan's involvement were exposed, it would spell disaster not only for him, but for Emily, whose name was tied to the transactions. "We need more," Isabella said, her determination unwavering. "We need irrefutable evidence, enough to bring Ethan down without implicating Emily." Ryan nodded, his resolve hardening. "Let's do it." Their next move was bold. With Isabella's guidance, Ryan reached out to a forensic accountant who specialized in uncovering financial fraud. Together, they devised a plan to track the flow of funds and gather evidence that would incriminate Ethan without implicating Emily. But just as they were making progress, a new complication arose. Claire, Emily's best friend, began to suspect that something was amiss. She noticed the tension in Emily's demeanor and the increasing secrecy surrounding her interactions with Ethan. Claire, ever loyal to Emily, decided to confront Ryan. One evening, as Ryan returned home, he found Claire waiting on his doorstep. Her expression was a mix of concern and determination. "We need to talk," she said firmly, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. Ryan sighed, shutting the door behind her. "What's this about, Claire?" "It's about Emily," Claire began, crossing her arms. "She's been distant, distracted, and I know you've noticed it too. What's going on, Ryan?" For a moment, Ryan considered deflecting, but Claire's unwavering gaze told him she wouldn't be easily deterred. "Claire," he began carefully. "I think Emily, she's involved with someone else." Claire's eyes widened, a mix of shock and disbelief crossing her face. "What? Are you sure?" Ryan nodded, his voice heavy with emotion. "I've seen the messages, the photos, and it's worse than that. She's caught up in something dangerous, something that could ruin her." Claire's shock turned to concern. "Ryan, if this is true, we have to help her. She's my best friend. I won't let her destroy herself." Ryan hesitated. "There's more to this than I can explain right now. But trust me, Claire, I'm doing everything I can to protect her." Meanwhile, Emily's relationship with Ethan was growing increasingly strained. The once thrilling affair had begun to feel suffocating as Ethan's demands escalated. He pressured her to sign documents she didn't fully understand, assuring her they were harmless. But Emily's instincts told her something was off. Late one night, as Ethan slept, Emily found herself scrolling through his laptop. She stumbled upon emails and financial records that made her blood run cold. Ethan's promises of love and a future together were a facade. He was using her, manipulating her trust to further his schemes. Emily's world crumbled as the truth sank in. She had betrayed Ryan, the man who had loved her unconditionally, for someone who saw her as nothing more than a pawn. In a twist of fate, Emily's discovery coincided with Isabella and Ryan's breakthrough. They finally had enough evidence to expose Ethan's crimes, but as they prepared to act, Isabella received an unexpected message from Emily. "I need to talk. Urgent." Isabella's instincts told her to be cautious, but curiosity got the better of her. She agreed to meet Emily at a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. When they met, Emily's demeanor was a mix of fear and determination. She didn't recognize Isabella as Ethan's wife, only as someone who might help her untangle the mess she was in. "I made a mistake," Emily confessed, her voice trembling. "Ethan? He's not who I thought he was. He's involved in something illegal, and he's dragging me down with him. I don't know what to do." Isabella listened intently, her emotions conflicted. Emily's regret seemed genuine, but it was hard to separate her role in the betrayal from her current vulnerability. "Emily," Isabella said carefully, "if you want to make this right, you need to cooperate with me. There's a way to expose Ethan without implicating you, but it won't be easy." Emily hesitated, the weight of her choices bearing down on her. Finally, she nodded. "I'll do whatever it takes." The stage was set for a showdown. With Emily's cooperation, Ryan and Isabella devised a plan to confront Ethan and bring his schemes to light. But as the pieces fell into place, one thing became clear. The road ahead would be fraught with danger, and the lines between ally and enemy would blur in ways they couldn't anticipate. The shadows of deception had grown darker, and the stakes had never been higher. The storm clouds of deception hovered heavier than ever over Ryan and Isabella as they pressed forward with their plan. Each day brought new discoveries, some unraveling the intricate scheme between Ethan and Emily, others raising more questions than answers. Their uneasy alliance had turned into a partnership of necessity, fueled by mutual betrayal and a simmering determination for justice. Emily's days had settled into a disjointed routine. She carried on her roles as Ryan's devoted wife and Ethan's clandestine lover with an unsettling ease. Her interior design projects served as a convenient cover for their meetings. She'd spend hours on the phone with Ethan, discussing both romantic fantasies and, unknowingly, ideas that fed into Ethan's larger scheme. The thrill of secrecy had dulled her moral compass. Meanwhile, Ethan skillfully juggled his deceit. His smooth-talking nature masked the growing unease he felt. Isabella's perceptive eyes, despite her silence, had always unnerved him. He avoided, spending long nights at home, claiming work pressures, while secretly overseeing his dubious financial operations and nurturing his affair. Ryan observed Emily's behavior with quiet intensity, a methodical predator waiting for the right moment. Every stolen glance at her phone, every contrived excuse to leave the house, added to the reservoir of evidence he collected. Isabella's technical expertise had become his ace in the hole. Her ability to decrypt messages and access Ethan's shadowy financial transactions had painted a clear picture of their crimes. "Ethan is bleeding his company dry," Isabella explained one evening, her voice cold and resolute. She had unearthed documents showing large sums being funneled through shell companies. These transactions were linked to accounts in Emily's name, accounts she seemed oblivious to. Why would he do that? Why involve Emily? Ryan asked, pacing their makeshift headquarters in Isabella's modest downtown apartment. "Ethan's greedy, but he's also strategic," Isabella replied. "He needs Emily as a scapegoat. If things go south, she'll take the fall. To him, she's expendable." The thought sent a jolt of rage through Ryan. As angry as he was at Emily for her betrayal, the idea of her being used so callously struck a nerve. Despite everything, a part of him still cared. "So what's our next step?" he asked, his voice firm. Isabella's eyes glittered. "We tighten the noose. I've already hacked into his main accounts. Now we need to lay traps to force his hand. If we can catch him making one wrong move, we'll have everything we need to expose him." Emily's friend Claire had grown suspicious of her behavior. As someone who'd been privy to Emily's struggles and secrets, Claire couldn't ignore the warning signs, the distant stares, evasive answers, and sudden shifts in mood. One afternoon, she confronted Emily during a lunch date. "Em, is there something you're not telling me?" Claire asked, her tone gentle but probing. Emily stiffened, her fork pausing mid-air. "What do you mean?" she replied, feigning ignorance. "You've been different lately, distant. And don't think I haven't noticed how much time you spend on your phone. If something's going on, you can tell me." "I'm your friend." Emily's heart raced. For a moment, she considered confessing. Claire had been her confidant for years, but the risk of her disapproval and the fear of destroying her facade held her back. "I've just been stressed with work," Emily said, plastering on a reassuring smile. "You know how demanding clients can be." Claire's eyes narrowed slightly, but she let the subject drop. For now, Ryan and Isabella's collaboration had begun to yield results. They planted fake leads in Ethan's business records, subtle discrepancies that he couldn't ignore. When Ethan attempted to address these issues, Isabella monitored his every move, logging his efforts to cover his tracks. The evidence mounted, but one key piece was still missing: proof of his connection to Emily. "We need her to slip up," Isabella said during one of their late-night strategy sessions. "If we can link her directly to his accounts, it'll be the final nail in his coffin." Ryan hesitated. "You're suggesting we set her up?" "I'm suggesting we expose the truth," Isabella countered. "You said you wanted justice. This is the only way." Ryan's jaw tightened. The lines between right and wrong were blurring, but he couldn't deny the logic of her plan. With reluctance, he agreed. The opportunity came sooner than expected. Ethan had arranged a private dinner with Emily at an upscale restaurant, ostensibly to discuss their future. Isabella intercepted the details through a combination of spyware and intuition. "This is our chance," she told Ryan. "We need to be there." Ryan's stomach churned at the thought of seeing Emily and Ethan together, but he knew there was no alternative. Disguised and seated discreetly across the room, he and Isabella watched the couple with laser focus. Emily appeared, nervous, her hands fidgeting with the edge of her napkin. Ethan, ever the charmer, exuded confidence. Their conversation was too low to overhear, but their body language spoke volumes. Then it happened. Ethan slid a sleek black folder across the table to Emily. She opened it hesitantly, her eyes scanning. The contents. Her expression shifted from confusion to alarm. "What do you think he's showing her?" Ryan whispered. "Something incriminating," Isabella replied. "We need to get that folder." When the dinner ended, Ryan and Isabella followed at a safe distance. Ethan and Emily parted ways outside the restaurant, each heading in opposite directions. Isabella tailed Ethan while Ryan focused on Emily. Back at home, Ryan waited for Emily to settle in before confronting her. The folder she'd brought back lay on the kitchen counter, its contents spilling out slightly. Ryan's pulse quickened as he saw glimpses of financial documents and what appeared to be forged signatures. "Emily!" he called, his voice steady but firm. She turned, startled.
"Ryan, you scared me."
"We need to talk," he said, gesturing toward the folder. "About this." Emily's face paled.
"Where did you—"
"Does it matter?" Ryan interrupted. "What matters is what's in there. You need to tell me the truth, Emily. No more lies." Tears welled in her eyes. For a moment it seemed as though she might come clean. But then the mask slipped back into place. "It's nothing," she said. "Just some paperwork Ethan asked me to look over for his business. He trusts my eye for detail." Ryan's jaw clenched. "Don't insult my intelligence, Emily. I know what's going on. I know about you and Ethan, and I know about the money." Her gasp was audible. "Ryan, Before she could finish, the doorbell rang. They both froze. Ryan moved to answer it, his mind racing. Standing on the porch was Claire, her expression a mix of determination and worry. "I need to talk to both of you," she said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. "Something's not right, and I'm not leaving until I get answers." The tension in the room was palpable as Claire confronted Emily, her questions sharp and relentless. Ryan observed silently, his emotions in turmoil. Emily's defenses crumbled under the weight of Claire's interrogation, and pieces of the truth began to spill out. But before the full story could emerge, Ryan's phone buzzed with a message from Isabella. "We have a problem. Ethan knows." His blood ran cold. The game had just become infinitely more dangerous. Ryan and Isabella's alliance, forged in betrayal, was now focused on uncovering Ethan's full plan. Their covert efforts demanded meticulous precision, and as they delved deeper, they found themselves juggling a dangerous game of deception, keeping their respective partners oblivious while systematically dismantling Ethan's schemes. But the more they uncovered, the more their mission unraveled darker truths neither of them was prepared for. Unbeknownst to Ryan, Emily's relationship with Ethan had shifted. What had once been thrilling clandestine meetings and stolen moments of passion now felt tainted with unease. Ethan's increasingly possessive behavior had begun to suffocate her. He'd always been charming, but his recent erratic mood swings revealed another side, a man prone to anger, demanding her constant attention. One evening, as Emily reviewed her financial accounts to pay the vendor for a client's redesign project, she noticed something peculiar. Several transactions she didn't remember authorizing were missing significant sums. Ethan had once playfully mentioned how he admired her interior design empire, but the joking reference now felt like a grim foreshadowing. Emily's instinct screamed at her to confront Ethan, but her fear of provoking him held her back.
"Torn between love and doubt," she confided in Claire.
"Claire, something's wrong," Emily said over coffee, her voice trembling. "I'm not sure I can trust Ethan.
There's money missing from my accounts and he's been acting
controlling lately? Claire's concern deepened. You have to protect yourself. If you think he's involved, you need evidence. And you need to tell Ryan. Emily cut her off sharply. Ryan doesn't know anything, and I'd like to keep it that way. He's been distant for months, and I'm not ready to open that can of worms. Claire frowned, but respected Emily's wishes. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? And if it gets worse, you'll let me help. Emily nodded, but her mind was already racing. If Ethan was behind the financial discrepancies, what else was he capable of? Meanwhile, Isabella's cyber investigation had borne fruit. Using her hacking expertise, she traced Ethan's embezzlement trail to a network of offshore accounts, one of which had Emily's name linked as a co-owner. Whether Emily was complicit or just a pawn remained unclear. Late one night, Isabella shared her findings with Ryan. He's laundering money through shell companies. Emily's accounts are tied to one of them, Isabella said, her voice grim. She might not even know. Ryan's jaw tightened. Or she does. Either way, we need to bring this to light. If Ethan's caught, Emily could be collateral damage. She might end up in prison too. Isabella's eyes narrowed. We have to expose him carefully. If he realizes we're on to him, he could retaliate against her or us. They began devising a plan to anonymously tip federal authorities while protecting Emily. But every step they took brought them closer to danger. As Isabella and Ryan worked together, their partnership became personal. Long nights spent strategizing led to moments of vulnerability. For the first time in years, Ryan found himself confiding in someone who genuinely seemed to understand his pain. Isabella, too, felt a connection she hadn't anticipated, but their mutual understanding blurred the lines of their alliance. One night, after successfully intercepting a critical email linking Ethan to a larger fraud scheme, Ryan and Isabella celebrated with wine at her apartment. Laughter turned to silence as their gazes lingered too long. In a moment of weakness, they kissed, a gesture fueled by shared anguish and misplaced longing. Both pulled away quickly, shame and regret crashing down. This isn't what we're here for, Isabella said, her voice unsteady. We can't let this complicate things. Ryan nodded, guilt gnawing at him. You're right. Let's focus on what matters. But the incident added a layer of tension to their partnership, one neither could easily dismiss. Ethan was no fool. He'd noticed subtle changes in Emily's demeanor, her guarded behavior, the way she avoided his touch, but it was a stray email notification on her phone that confirmed his suspicions. Someone had accessed his offshore account records. Panicking, Ethan confronted Emily one evening after dinner. "Who have you been talking to?" he demanded, his voice low but menacing. Emily's eyes widened. "What are you talking about?" "Don't play dumb, Emily. Someone's digging into my accounts, and I know it's connected to you." Emily's shock was genuine. "I don't know what you're talking about. Why would I do that?" Ethan studied her, his suspicion not entirely abated. "If I find out you've been betraying me, there'll be consequences." Emily's fear turned to anger. "You're the one who's been lying to me. I trusted you, Ethan, and now I'm wondering if that was the biggest mistake of my life." Ethan's expression darkened. "Be careful, Emily. You don't want to
cross me." As he stormed out, Emily realized the extent of the danger she was in.
Ethan was hiding something far worse than infidelity. Claire, ever the loyal friend, decided to investigate Ethan on her own. While Emily had brushed off her earlier warnings, Claire couldn't ignore the red flags. Using contacts from her journalism days, she began digging into Ethan's background. What she uncovered sent chills down her spine. Ethan had a history of financial misconduct and connections to unsavory individuals. His charm masked a ruthless ambition that left destruction in its wake. Claire knew she had to act quickly to protect Emily. She arranged to meet Ryan, believing he might have insights that could help. Over coffee, Claire revealed her findings, unaware of the full scope of Ryan's own involvement. "Ethan's dangerous, Ryan. I'm worried about Emily. She's in over her head," Claire said, her voice
urgent. Ryan hesitated, debating how much to disclose. "I know, Claire. I've been looking into him too. We need to work together to get Emily out of this." Their shared concern for Emily solidified their alliance, but Claire couldn't shake the feeling that Ryan wasn't telling her everything.
Ryan, Isabella, and Claire closed in on Ethan's operations. Their activities didn't go unnoticed. Ethan's paranoia grew, and he began taking drastic measures to cover his tracks. He liquidated assets, erased digital footprints, and reached out to old associates for protection. But Isabella was always one step ahead. Using a sophisticated phishing scheme, she gained access to Ethan's final set of incriminating files. The evidence was damning enough to bring federal charges against him. Ryan and Isabella prepared to hand over their findings to the authorities, but a last-minute revelation changed everything. Among the files was a document implicating Emily in the fraud, not as a victim, but as an active participant. Whether Ethan had coerced her or she'd willingly joined him remained unclear. Ryan's world crumbled once more. The woman he'd vowed to protect was now a suspect in the very crime they'd sought to expose. With time running out, Ryan confronted Emily, hoping to extract the truth. "Did you know what Ethan was doing?" he demanded, his voice shaking. Emily's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know, Ryan. I swear I didn't. He told me it was all legitimate. I only signed what he asked because I trusted him." Ryan wanted to believe her, but the evidence suggested otherwise. Torn between love and doubt, he realized their next steps could either save or destroy them both. The stage was set for a final confrontation, one that would unravel the tangled web of lies, betrayal, and deceit. But as the walls closed in, Ryan and Isabella couldn't ignore one haunting question. Could they truly trust anyone, even each other? The dim light of a new day spilled through the cracks of Ryan's blinds, but there was no warmth in the sunrise. It had been weeks since he had known peace, each passing day a crescendo of secrets and schemes. His alliance with Isabella, the hacker-turned-avenger, had brought them closer to exposing Ethan and Emily's tangled deceit. But now, standing at the brink of action, the stakes felt higher than ever. Ryan's fingers hovered over his phone, rereading Isabella's latest message. "The financial trail is almost complete. Meet me at my place tonight. We'll finalize everything." Though their partnership had been fruitful, Ryan couldn't shake the unease creeping up his spine. He wasn't sure whether it was the culmination of betrayal, the impending confrontation, or something unspoken between him and Isabella that set his nerves alight. Still, he knew there was no turning back now. Across town, Emily's day began with equal tension. Sitting on the edge of their bed, she stared at the crumpled sheets beside her. The guilt of her actions weighed heavily, but a darker shadow loomed. Ethan's once charming demeanor had shifted over the past few weeks, his affection replaced by impatience and thinly veiled threats. "Emily," he had said just last night, his voice cold, "if you can't handle this, maybe you're not as indispensable as I thought." Ethan's words weren't just dismissive, they carried a promise of retribution. She was no longer sure if their love had ever been real, or if she had merely been a pawn in his greater game. Fear crept into the edges of her resolve, whispering that her choices had led her too far into the dark to escape. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand, pulling her back to reality. The text was from Claire, her best friend and confidant. "Lunch today. We need to talk." Emily's fingers hesitated over the screen. Claire had grown more distant lately, her usual warmth replaced with a vague coolness. "Nevertheless," Emily agreed, hoping to confide in her friend one last time. As the clock struck noon, Claire and Emily sat at their favourite cafe. The bustling ambience of lunch-hour patrons did little to ease the tension between them. Claire stirred her coffee absent-mindedly, her eyes darting to Emily before finally breaking the silence. "Emily," Claire began cautiously, "something's been eating at me and I think you need to hear it." Emily's heart sank. She had always trusted Claire, but the weight of her secrets made her dread what might come next. "I know about Ethan," Claire said, her voice steady but firm. "And I know about the money." Emily's breath hitched. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Don't play dumb, Emily!" Claire snapped, leaning closer.
Ethan's been siphoning money from his company, and you're part of it whether you realize it or not. I've been keeping tabs, and trust me, this isn't just an affair. It's a crime. Emily's mind raced, her face flushing with panic. "I didn't know," she stammered. I thought he loved me." Claire's expression softened momentarily, but her resolve remained. "If you really didn't know, then you need to get out. Now. He's dangerous, Emily. People
Like Ethan don't care who gets hurt as long as they win." Emily's hands trembled as she reached for her coffee, her world unraveling with every word. Claire's warning wasn't just a lifeline. It was a mirror reflecting the mess she had created. She realized that whatever feelings she had for Ethan had been eclipsed by fear. Fear of him, fear of what she had become, and fear of losing everything she once held dear. Meanwhile, at Isabella's apartment, Ryan pored over the data she had compiled. The room was filled with an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional tapping of keys as Isabella navigated her labyrinth of encrypted files. "Here," she said finally, her voice breaking the tension. "This is the proof we need. Bank transfers, falsified invoices and offshore accounts. Ethan's been running a full-blown embezzlement scheme, and Emily's been his unwitting accomplice." Ryan leaned over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the damning evidence. "What about the authorities?" he asked. "Should we hand this over to them now?" Isabella hesitated, her fingers pausing mid-keystroke. "Not yet," she said carefully. "We need to make sure Ethan and Emily can't weasel their way out of this. One wrong move and they'll destroy the evidence before we can act." Her logic was sound, but Ryan couldn't shake the unease growing in his chest. Isabella's determination bordered on obsession, and he began to wonder if her thirst for justice might lead them down a dangerous path. As night fell, Emily found herself driving aimlessly through the city, her mind a whirlwind of regret and fear. Claire's words echoed in her ears, and for the first time she considered reaching out to Ryan. She had wronged him, betrayed his trust in the worst way possible, but he was the only person she could imagine turning to. Her phone buzzed in the passenger seat, snapping her out of her thoughts. It was Ethan. "We need to talk. Now." The message sent a chill down her spine. Ethan's tone left no room for argument, and she knew ignoring him would only escalate the situation. With a deep breath, she turned her car toward his apartment, her hands gripping the wheel tightly. When she arrived, Ethan was waiting at the door, his expression dark and foreboding. He pulled her inside without a word, closing the door firmly behind her. "What's going on?" Emily asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Ethan's eyes bored into hers. "I'm going to ask you once, and you'd better tell me the truth," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Have you been talking?"
to anyone about us? About the money? Emily's heart raced. No, she lied, her voice barely above a whisper. Why would I? Ethan studied her for a moment before nodding. Good. Because if I find out you've betrayed me, you'll regret it. The threat hung in the air, suffocating her. Emily, you
realized then that she was in over her head, and Ethan wasn't just a manipulative lover, he was a predator. Back at Isabella's apartment, Ryan's phone buzzed with a text from Claire. The message was short but alarming. Emily's in trouble. Call me. Ryan's pulse quickened as he dialed her number. Claire's voice was frantic when she answered. Ryan, I think Ethan's going to hurt her, she said, her words tumbling over each other. She went to see him and she's not answering her phone. You need to do something. Ryan didn't hesitate. Grabbing his keys, he turned to Isabella. We need to go. Now. Isabella's eyes narrowed. This wasn't part of the plan, she said, but Ryan's determination silenced her objections. When they arrived at Ethan's apartment, the door was slightly ajar, a foreboding silence emanating from within. Ryan pushed it open cautiously, his heart pounding in his chest. The living room was a mess, furniture overturned and papers scattered across the floor. In the center of the chaos stood Ethan, his face twisted with rage. Emily cowered against the wall, her eyes wide with fear. Let her go, Ryan demanded, his voice steady despite the terror coursing through him. Ethan turned, a cruel smile spreading across his face. Well, well, he sneered. The loyal husband comes to the rescue. How predictable. Before Ryan could respond, Isabella stepped forward, her calm demeanor a stark contrast to the tension in the room. Ethan, she said, her voice cold and commanding. It's over. We have everything, the accounts, the transfers, the proof. You're done. Ethan's eyes flicked to her, his confidence faltering for the first time. You think you can take me down? He spat. You have no idea who you're dealing with. But Isabella didn't waver. Neither do you, she said, pulling out her phone and pressing a button. Moments later, the sound of approaching sirens filled the air. Ethan's bravado crumbled as the reality of his situation set in. The walls he had built around his schemes were crashing down, and there was no escape. As the police stormed the apartment, Ryan moved to Emily's side, his anger momentarily overshadowed by relief. She looked at him with tears in her eyes, her voice trembling as she whispered, I'm sorry. But Ryan didn't respond. There would be time for apologies later. For now, the nightmare was finally coming to an end. Or so they thought. The California air was crisp as Ryan and Isabella drove through the winding streets leading to Ethan's secluded villa. The sprawling property was a testament to his ill-gotten wealth, an extravagant facade that hid the darkness within. Tonight, they were determined to peel back the layers of deception and confront the man who had caused so much destruction. As they approached the gated entrance, Isabella pulled over to the side of the road. She opened the trunk, revealing an arsenal of surveillance tools and equipment. Ryan marveled at her precision and preparedness. We're not breaking in, Isabella said, catching Ryan's concerned look. We're observing. Ethan has a party tonight, and I guarantee he'll slip up in some way. We just need to catch it. Ryan nodded, though the idea of waiting tested his patience. His hands clenched into fists, a physical manifestation of the storm within. Every fiber of his being wanted to confront Ethan face to face, but Isabella's plan was smarter. They couldn't risk tipping their hand before they had solid evidence. The villa's grand entrance was lit up like a beacon, welcoming the wealthy and influential guests who filed in wearing their finest attire. Ethan's charm was on full display as he greeted each attendee, his smile never faltering. Emily, radiant in a sleek emerald dress, stood by his side. She seemed at ease, laughing and chatting with the crowd, a picture of elegance and poise. From their hidden vantage point, Ryan's heart twisted at the sight. It was one thing to know about the affair, but seeing Emily so comfortable in her new role was a fresh wound. Isabella's voice cut through his thoughts. "Don't let it distract you. We're here for the bigger picture." She handed him a pair of binoculars and gestured toward a side window. "That's his office. If I know Ethan, he'll retreat there once he thinks no one is watching." Ryan focused the binoculars on the room, waiting for any sign of movement. The minutes dragged on, each one heavier than the last, until finally Ethan appeared. He closed the door behind him and pulled out his phone, his demeanor shifting from host to schemer in an instant. Isabella tapped her laptop, initiating a remote hacking program she had set up earlier. It was risky, but she was confident in her abilities. The screen displayed Ethan's phone activity in real time, a cascade of encrypted messages and financial transactions. "Look at this," Isabella murmured, pointing to a series of texts. The messages were directed to someone labeled Z. The exchanges were cryptic, but hinted at a larger conspiracy, embezzlement, blackmail, and even potential violence against those who crossed Ethan. Ryan's jaw tightened. "Who's Z?" Isabella shook her head. "That's what we need to find out. Whoever they are, they're not just an accomplice. They're orchestrating this with Ethan. He's not the mastermind we thought he was." The party began to wind down as guests filtered out, their laughter fading into the night. Emily's absence didn't go unnoticed by Ryan. She had disappeared midway through the evening, and his mind raced with possibilities. Was she meeting
Ethan privately? Or was she unknowingly caught in something even darker? "We need to get closer," Ryan said. Isabella hesitated. "We're not ready for that yet. One wrong move and this whole thing falls apart." But Ryan was already moving. He navigated through the shadows, his footsteps silent against the gravel. Isabella cursed under her breath and followed, her equipment slung over her shoulder. They
reached the side of the villa where a narrow staircase led to a basement entrance. The door was ajar, as if inviting them in. Ryan's instincts screamed caution, but his resolve outweighed his fear. The basement was dimly lit, its walls lined with shelves of expensive wine bottles. At the far end of the room, a soft glow emanated from a partially open door. Voices drifted out, low and tense. Ryan and Isabella crept closer, careful not to make a sound. Inside, Ethan stood with a man Ryan didn't recognize. The stranger was tall and imposing, his sharp features partially obscured by the shadows. Ryan's breath hitched as he realized this must be Z. "The funds are secure," Ethan said, his tone deferential. "But we need more time. Isabella's been digging, and I think she's on to us." Z's expression darkened. "Then deal with
her permanently." Ryan's blood ran cold. He turned to Isabella, whose face was a mask of fury and determination.
They had to act, but they couldn't do it alone. Back at their safe house, Ryan and Isabella regrouped. The stakes had escalated, and it was clear they were out of their depth. They needed someone who could level the playing field. Isabella made a call to an old contact, a private investigator named Marcus who specialized in high-stakes cases. Marcus arrived within hours, his presence commanding and reassuring. He listened intently as Isabella and Ryan laid out the situation, his sharp eyes betraying no emotion. "You've got a hornet's nest here," he said finally. "But you're lucky. I've dealt with worse." With Marcus's help, they formulated a plan. The first step was to expose Ethan and Z's operation without endangering themselves or Emily. They would need concrete evidence, and Marcus had the resources to get it. "Ethan thinks he's untouchable," Marcus said. "But everyone has a weakness. We just have to find his." The following days were a whirlwind of preparation. Marcus infiltrated Ethan's network, uncovering a web of criminal activity that extended far beyond what Ryan and Isabella had imagined. Embezzlement, fraud, and ties to organized crime were just the tip of the iceberg. Z's identity remained elusive, but his influence was undeniable. Meanwhile, Ryan struggled with conflicting emotions about Emily. Her betrayal still burned, but he couldn't shake the feeling that she was more victim than villain in this twisted game. He resolved to find her and uncover the truth, even if it meant risking everything. Their plan culminated in a high-stakes sting operation. With Marcus's guidance, they orchestrated a scenario that would force Ethan and Z into the open. It was dangerous, but it was their best chance to bring them down. As the pieces fell into place, Ryan and Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that the endgame was fast approaching. The shadows of deception were closing in, and the line between friend and foe was becoming increasingly blurred. The days following Isabella's risky infiltration of Ethan's hidden data marked a turning point for Ryan and her. Their makeshift alliance was now fully immersed in uncovering the truth. The documents recovered by Isabella revealed a darker reality than either of them had anticipated. Ethan's corruption wasn't limited to embezzlement. It was tied to a sprawling network of illegal deals, offshore accounts, and falsified identities that implicated powerful individuals. For Ryan, the betrayal cut deeper than he imagined. It wasn't just Emily's infidelity that haunted him, it was the realization that her actions, no matter how naive, had dragged him into a web of lies far beyond their marriage. Isabella, despite her hardened exterior, showed a rare vulnerability as she reflected on the years of deception she had unknowingly lived under. Together, they faced the daunting task of deciding their next steps. Emily's behavior grew more erratic as Ryan distanced himself, feigning oblivion to her transgressions. He wanted her to believe she still held the upper hand, all while he meticulously pieced together her role in Ethan's schemes. One evening, Emily returned home visibly agitated. Her phone buzzed incessantly and she snapped at Ryan for trivial matters. "What's wrong?" Ryan asked, masking his frustration with concern. "Work has been overwhelming," she muttered, avoiding
his gaze.
Her vague answer wasn't unusual, but tonight it felt like an admission of guilt. Ryan nodded sympathetically. "If there's anything I can do to help." Emily hesitated, her lips parting as though she wanted to confess, but she simply shook her head. "I'll figure it out." Her demeanor only confirmed Ryan's suspicions. Emily was caught between loyalty to Ethan and the crumbling facade of their marriage. Meanwhile, Isabella delved deeper into Ethan's digital fortress. Among the files, she discovered emails exchanged between Ethan and his associates. They discussed laundering money through Emily's design business, making her an unwitting accessory. Isabella's hands trembled as she read further. One thread revealed Ethan's contingency plan. If their operation was compromised, Emily would be framed as the mastermind. Furious, Isabella called Ryan. "We need to act now. Ethan's setting Emily up to take the fall if things go south." Ryan's chest tightened. Despite his anger toward Emily, the thought of her being manipulated into such a perilous position made him uneasy. "What's the plan?" "Expose him," Isabella replied, her voice resolute. "We'll leak the documents anonymously to law enforcement, but we need a fail-safe to ensure Emily's safety." Convincing Emily to trust them was a gamble, but Ryan knew it was the only way to protect her. The next morning, he staged an intervention. As Emily prepared to leave for an alleged client meeting, Ryan blocked her path. We need to talk. Now, he said firmly. Emily's eyes darted nervously. I'm late, Ryan. This can't wait. Reluctantly, she sat across from him in the living room. Ryan placed a stack of printouts on the coffee table, emails, financial records, and photographs Isabella had retrieved. Emily's face drained of colour as she flipped through them. Where did you get these? She whispered. That doesn't matter, Ryan replied. What matters is that Ethan is using you. He's laundering money through your business, and if he's caught, you'll take the blame. Tears welled in Emily's eyes. I didn't know. I just wanted to help him. He said he needed support, that he was trapped in a bad situation. Ryan's voice softened. You've made mistakes, but it's not too late to make things right. We can bring him down, together. Emily hesitated, her guilt and fear warring within her. Finally, she nodded. What do I need to do? With Emily on their side, Ryan and Isabella devised a plan to expose Ethan and his network. Emily would act as their insider, feeding them information while maintaining her facade with Ethan. It was a dangerous game, one that required precision and unwavering resolve. Emily arranged a meeting with Ethan at a secluded restaurant, wearing a discreet recording device provided by Isabella. Ryan and Isabella monitored the conversation from a nearby car, their tension palpable. I'm worried, Ethan, Emily began, her voice trembling convincingly. Ryan's been asking questions about my business. What if he finds out? Ethan leaned back, his demeanor calculating. He won't. You're the perfect cover, Emily. No one suspects the talented designer with a spotless record. But what if something goes wrong? She pressed. I can't go to jail, Ethan. I can't. Ethan's expression darkened. If you keep your mouth shut and follow my lead, nothing will go wrong. Do you understand? The venom in his tone sent shivers down Emily's spine, but she held her composure. I understand. The recording was damning, but before they could deliver it to authorities, Ethan grew suspicious. He began monitoring Emily's movements, his paranoia escalating. One evening, he confronted her at her office. You've been acting strange, he accused, his voice low and menacing. Are you hiding something? Emily's heart raced. Of course not. I've been stressed, that's all. Ethan's gaze bore into her. If I find out you're lying to me, you'll regret it. Terrified, Emily texted Ryan a single word. Help. Within minutes, Ryan and Isabella arrived, their plan already in motion. Isabella hacked into Ethan's security system, ensuring their escape route was clear. Emily slipped out of the office, her hands trembling as she climbed into their car. We have enough evidence, Isabella said. It's time to take this to the authorities. Submitting the evidence was both a relief and a gamble. The files painted a vivid picture of Ethan's crimes, but the process of dismantling his network would be arduous. For the first time in months, Ryan felt a semblance of hope. Emily, though shaken, began to rebuild her trust with Ryan. Their journey was far from over, but they were united in their pursuit of justice. Isabella, too, found solace in the alliance she had formed. Her skills, once used for illicit purposes, were now a force for good. But as they celebrated their small victory, a new threat loomed on the horizon. Ethan's associates were aware of the breach, and they wouldn't go down without a fight. The web of lies had tightened, but the fight was far from over. For Ryan, Emily, and Isabella, the path ahead was fraught with danger, but they were prepared to face it together. The walls were closing in on Ethan's empire. The authorities were now in possession of the damning evidence provided by Ryan, Isabella, and Emily. Investigations began discreetly, but the storm brewing in the background was anything but subtle. Ethan's paranoia intensified, and his once steady demeanor cracked under the pressure. For Ryan, Emily, and Isabella, the relief of taking the first step toward justice was overshadowed by the very real danger they faced. Ethan was unpredictable, and his associates were ruthless. They knew their battle wasn't over. In fact, it had only just begun. Ethan sat in his dimly lit office, his hands trembling as he scrolled through encrypted messages on his laptop. His most trusted contact, a man known only as Falcon,
had sent an alarming update. Authorities are sniffing around. We need to shut everything down. Ethan's mind raced. The offshore accounts, the shell companies, the laundering. It was all unraveling.
His network of criminals had operated undetected for years, but now it was in disarray. He slammed his fist on the desk, the sound echoing in the empty room. Who had betrayed him? How had his perfectly orchestrated scheme fallen apart? Ethan's instincts told him Emily was the weak link. Her recent anxiety, her sudden evasiveness, she had to be working against him. He couldn't prove it yet, but he was determined to find out. At Ryan's home, the atmosphere was tense but focused. The trio gathered around the dining table. Outside, makeshift war room, Isabella had mapped out Ethan's network on her laptop, connecting names, transactions, and locations with the precision of a surgeon. The authorities will dismantle his operation, Isabella said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. But we need to stay ahead of him. If Ethan figures out we're behind this, he won't hesitate to retaliate. Emily's face was pale, her hands gripping a cup of tea she hadn't touched. He knows me too well. If he's suspicious, he'll come after me first. Ryan reached out, placing a reassuring hand on hers. We won't let that happen. We're in this together. Emily nodded, but the fear in her eyes was all unmistakable. She had risked everything to expose Ethan, but the weight of her past choices was crushing her. Ryan, despite his lingering anger, couldn't deny the bond they still shared. Their trust was fragile, but it was there. Ethan's frustration boiled over as he took matters into his own hands. He hacked into Emily's email account, searching for any evidence of her betrayal. What he found shocked him, an anonymous email sent to a local FBI office containing key details of his operation. The sender's identity was obscured, but the message's content made one thing clear. Someone close to him had betrayed him. Fueled by rage, Ethan called Emily. His voice was icy, his words carefully measured. We need to talk. Meet me at the lake house tomorrow at noon. Emily's heart sank. The lake house was isolated, a place Ethan used for private dealings. She knew this wasn't a casual invitation. Why? She asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Just be there, he replied, hanging up before she could protest. Emily immediately told Ryan and Isabella. He knows something, she said, her voice trembling. He'll try to intimidate me, maybe worse. Isabella's expression hardened. Then we use it to our advantage. Let him think he's in control while we gather more evidence. The following day, Emily arrived at the lake house, her nerves frayed. She had a hidden recording device pinned to her blouse, its signal transmitted to Ryan and Isabella, who were parked a mile away, listening intently. Ethan greeted her with a forced smile, his eyes cold and calculating. You've been distant, he said, pouring them both a drink. I need to know I can trust you. Emily took a deep breath. You can. I've done everything you've asked. Ethan leaned forward, his voice low. Then why is the FBI sniffing around my business? Why do I feel like someone close to me is feeding them information? Emily's pulse quickened. I don't know anything about that. Maybe one of your associates got sloppy. Ethan studied her intently, his silence more unnerving than any accusation. Finally, he spoke. If I find out you've betrayed me, Emily, there won't be anywhere you can hide. As Ethan's confrontation with Emily unfolded, Isabella monitored the recording, her fingers poised over her laptop's keyboard. She had tapped into Ethan's personal network, watching for any sign of retaliation. "He's suspicious, but not certain," Isabella said to Ryan. "We need to act fast. I've located one of his offshore accounts. If we can trace its transactions, we'll have undeniable proof of his activities." Ryan nodded, his jaw set. "Do it." Isabella's skills were unparalleled, but even she faced challenges breaking through Ethan's layers of encryption. As she worked, Ryan kept his eyes on the audio feed, his fists clenched every time Ethan's voice turned threatening. "Come on, Emily," he muttered under his breath. "Hold it together." Ethan's interrogation ended abruptly. He dismissed Emily with a cold warning. "Stay close, I'll be watching you." Emily drove away, her hands shaking. She met Ryan and Isabella at a prearranged location, her face pale but determined. "He's on to us. We need to finish this before he makes his move." Isabella finally broke through the encryption, uncovering a series of transactions linking Ethan to a notorious cartel. The evidence was explosive, enough to dismantle not just Ethan's operation, but his entire network. "This is it," Isabella said, turning the laptop toward Ryan and Emily. "We send this to the FBI and he's done." Ryan hesitated. "What about his associates? They won't go down quietly." Isabella's expression darkened. "We'll deal with them when the time comes. Right now, Ethan is the priority." That evening, the trio submitted the new evidence anonymously. The response was swift. The FBI launched a coordinated operation to arrest Ethan and his closest associates. News of the raid spread quickly, sending shockwaves through Ethan's network. Ethan, however, remained elusive. He had anticipated the betrayal and vanished before law enforcement could apprehend him. His absence cast a shadow over their victory, leaving them to wonder when, or if, he would resurface. In the days that followed, Ryan and Emily began to rebuild their relationship, though scars remained. Emily's guilt was a constant presence, but her determination to make amends gave Ryan hope. Isabella, on the other hand, faced her own reckoning. Ethan's escape meant she was still in danger, but for the first time in years, she felt a sense of closure. She had confronted the man who had deceived her and found strength in her alliance with Ryan and Emily. Yet, as they celebrated their hard-won victory, a chilling message appeared on Isabella's laptop. "You think it's over? It's just beginning." The signature was unmistakable. Falcon. The battle was far from over. Ethan's shadow loomed large, and his thirst for revenge was more menacing than ever. Every step Ryan, Emily, and Isabella took toward normalcy felt haunted by the spectre of retribution. His network may have crumbled, but Ethan's resolve remained unbroken, and his cunning mind ensured he would strike back when least expected. The message from Falcon sent a shiver through Isabella's spine. The ominous warning wasn't just a taunt, it was a declaration of war. Ethan's escape left a storm brewing, and the trio knew that the danger was far from over. Every move they made was now laced with paranoia, as shadows of Ethan's past threats loomed large over their present lives. Ethan was no longer the calculated mastermind in control of his empire. On the run, he had to rely on his wits and dwindling resources, but his mind, sharpened by years of scheming, wasn't idle. Ethan had one singular goal: to make Ryan, Emily, and Isabella pay for their betrayal. Hiding in an old safe house in the outskirts of Nevada, he devised a plan to dismantle their lives piece by piece. He reached out to Falcon, the one associate he could still trust. Falcon, a brilliant hacker and strategist, had a vendetta of his own against Isabella for exposing him years earlier. Together, They plotted to use their target's strengths against them. Ethan would exploit Ryan's protective instincts, Emily's guilt, and Isabella's calculated precision to set his trap. Meanwhile, Ryan, Emily, and Isabella tried to settle into a semblance of normalcy. Ryan had reopened his private investigation office, taking small cases to keep busy. Emily began volunteering at a local women's shelter, hoping to atone for her past. Isabella, still wary of Falcon's reach, worked tirelessly to erase any traceable digital footprints. One evening, as Ryan was reviewing case files in his office, an anonymous envelope was slid under his door. Inside was a single photograph of Emily's car parked near the lake house, a chilling reminder of the confrontation with Ethan. Scrawled on the back were the words, "You can't protect her forever." Ryan's blood ran cold. He immediately called Emily and Isabella. "He's back," he said, his voice tense, "and he's watching us." Ethan's plan unfolded slowly and methodically. He sent Emily a cryptic email pretending to be a former victim of his schemes, seeking her help. The email contained a link, a trap set by Falcon to infiltrate Isabella's secure network. Emily, desperate to help, forwarded it to Isabella without realizing the danger. Isabella's defenses flagged the link immediately. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. "This is Falcon," she said, her voice cold. "He's testing us." Emily's face turned pale. "I didn't know, I thought—" "It's okay," Ryan interjected. "We'll turn this against them. Let them think they're winning." Isabella nodded. "If Falcon's watching, we'll give him something to see." Isabella began planting false trails, feeding Falcon fabricated data that pointed to non-existent allies and safe houses. Ryan used his investigative skills to track Falcon's digital footprints, narrowing down his location to a hidden server farm in Seattle. They worked tirelessly, their focus united by the common threat. As they closed in, Ethan struck again. He sent Ryan a package containing a recording of Emily confessing her initial complicity in his schemes. The recording was from years ago, but Ethan's timing was impeccable. It was a calculated attempt to sow distrust. Ryan listened to the recording. Alone, his emotions a storm of betrayal and understanding. When he confronted Emily, her tears were immediate. "I've told you everything," she pleaded. "You know I've changed. Please believe me." Ryan's heart ached, but he nodded. "I believe you, but we can't let him manipulate us. Not now." The trio's efforts finally paid off. Using Isabella's counter-hacks and Ryan's detective work, they pinpointed Ethan's safe house. The FBI, still pursuing Ethan for his previous crimes, agreed to raid the location based on the new evidence they provided. But Ethan had anticipated this. When the raid occurred, the house was rigged with explosives, a message to his enemies that he would never go down without a fight. The FBI found no trace of Ethan, only a taunting note, "I'm always one step ahead." As the trio regrouped, exhausted but determined, Isabella received an encrypted message on her laptop. It was from Falcon, but the tone was unexpected. "Ethan betrayed me. I have information you'll want. Meet me alone." Isabella was skeptical, but Ryan insisted they couldn't ignore it. The meeting was arranged in a public park, with Ryan and Emily watching from a distance. When Falcon arrived, he handed Isabella a flash drive. "He's more dangerous than you know," Falcon said. "This drive contains everything. Use it wisely." Before Isabella could respond, Falcon vanished into the crowd. Back at their safe house, they reviewed the data. It contained detailed plans for a massive cyber attack Ethan had been orchestrating, targeting financial institutions and critical infrastructure across the country. "He's not just after us," Isabella said, her voice trembling. "He wants to burn everything to the ground." With the FBI's help, they launched a coordinated effort to stop Ethan's attack. The tension was palpable as they worked around the clock, dismantling his digital infrastructure piece by piece. Finally, they tracked Ethan to a remote cabin in the mountains, where he had been operating under the radar. This time, there was no escape. The FBI stormed the cabin, and Ethan, cornered and defiant, surrendered with a smirk. "You think you've won?" he said as they led him away. "This is far from over." With Ethan behind bars, Ryan, Emily, and Isabella tried to move forward. The scars of their ordeal ran deep, but they had survived. Ryan and Emily began rebuilding their relationship, their bond strengthened by the trials they had faced. Isabella found solace in knowing she had outsmarted Falcon and Ethan, proving to herself that she was no longer a victim. But as they looked to the future, one question lingered. Was Ethan truly defeated, or was his promise of retribution a shadow that would follow them forever? The echoes of their ordeal lingered like whispers in the wind, but life, as it always does, moved forward. Ryan, Emily, and Isabella each found themselves at a crossroads, their paths no longer entangled in the same web of deception, but forever, shaped by the events they had endured. For Ryan and Emily, the road to rebuilding trust was long and fraught with challenges. Their once picture-perfect life was now a tapestry of scars and lessons learned. Ryan reopened his private investigation firm, pouring his analytical mind into uncovering truths for others, while Emily found solace in using her design skills to help rehabilitate spaces for domestic violence survivors. Together they worked to create a new foundation, not built on illusions but on a hard-earned understanding of each other's flaws and strengths. Isabella, ever the solitary warrior, disappeared from their lives as quietly as she had entered. She moved to a coastal town in the Pacific Northwest, opening a small cybersecurity consultancy that operated under the radar. Though her new life was quieter, it was far from idle. She remained vigilant, her skills a silent barrier against threats like Ethan. Occasionally, she would check in on Ryan and Emily from afar, ensuring their world stayed intact. Ethan, now incarcerated in a high-security prison, maintained his smirk even as the world moved on without him. His empire lay in ruins, his allies scattered or captured, but his mind remained sharp. The shadow of his promises loomed large, a quiet reminder that the battle might not be over. Somewhere deep within, he nurtured the seeds of vengeance, waiting for the right moment to act. As seasons turned, the scars of betrayal faded into memories. For Ryan, Emily, and Isabella, life was no longer defined by the shadows of deception, but by the light they had fought to reclaim. Though the world around them grew quieter, they knew the lessons of their struggle would remain. They were survivors, not of a perfect world, but of a broken one. And that made their strength unbreakable. And yet, in the stillness of the night, when the world seemed most at peace, each of them would occasionally glance at the horizon, wondering if the shadows would one day return.